All right, we are continuing with the demo of assignment 2. We've sketched out our vision for our creature collage. And after we sketched our vision, which you'll see here, I'm going to open that up in preview just so I have it open somewhere to reference when I need to. Then we started a search for reference. So I started building reference there, and then I found a lot more. And I'm going to bring all that reference. Well, there's a difference, actually, between two things. I have one folder of the inspiration that I looked at before that I sketched, and I want to bring together kind of the features of these legendary bird Pokemon into my own believable bird creature with lots of color and exotic textures. And I have some ideas about where I can find them. And then since then, I've collected reference and put it onto a folder. With some other ideas as well. I've even marked some of the references being better than others. And there is lots. The assignment requires at least 5 different animals be combined. So you're not using, a leg from 4 different lions. That doesn't count, right? You want to use different textures and combine them into a fantasy landscape. And all of these reference images are also large enough at least 10 megapixels that when you view them actual size, you see a high level of detail. Now the problem is with birds, especially birds in the wild and not like taxiderm birds, it can be tricky to get good photo reference that's in focus because they're always moving. So you want to make sure, especially with this assignment, that you're checking your reference and that it is fairly good quality. It doesn't need to be absolutely perfect quality, but it should make good use of its high resolution. And that's why I designate some of these images as being stronger candidates for use than others. Even if they're all high enough resolution, the ones I've marked with the yellow are ones that I think have aspects that I want to use. And they're not all wildlife. I'm going to composite the flowers into the bird as well, and some other aspects. I even found some just pelts of golden pheasants, which are somewhat disturbing, but very good in terms of texture reference and color, and shows the kind of variety I'm going to want to have in this project. All right, so now how do we go about building on top of our sketch and bringing our reference in a way that's usable? So I'm going to keep that folder open and off to the side a little bit. And I'm going to open my sketch, not just in preview, but now in Photoshop. If you sketched it in your sketchbook, you can take a photo of it with your FaceTime camera, just like we did for our landscape. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change its canvas size to give me a little bit more space, because I want to maybe make that wing a little bit bigger. And now I want to make this image a printable size. So I go to image size, and if it wasn't already, I'd want to make it around 14 inches wide by something around 11 inches tall by 350 pixels per inch. So when you just scan a sketch that you've done in your sketchbook or take a picture of it and brought it in, you're going to want to enlarge that to be at around 11 by 14 inches by 350 pixels per inch. And that way this resolution will be high enough to give us a good printout. Then I'm going to start bringing in my best references. And the first one is this. I love these wings. They're nice and sharp. I like the position of the legs with the anatomy. Now I'm not going to shrink it at all. I'm going to bring it in right from that folder. It comes in as a smart object. And then I'm just going to lasso around the bird. The only regret with this reference is how the background's going to be a little difficult to cut out because it's got so much visual information, but it shouldn't be impossible. And then I hit Command J to duplicate it, and then I can turn off that background image. Now, so I'm not just piling images up onto the same places. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to use my guides and my rulers with the Move tool and draw a box around what my printable area is. And then I'm going to grow it and give myself kind of a desk to work on. And this time I'll use canvas size. And I'm going to make it, like I did last time, 40 inches by 30 inches tall. And instead of being a white extension, I'm going to make it a gray extension, just so you can see that difference. Then to fit it all on screen, I can hit Command 0. And if I use Auto Select with Layer, which is appropriate at this point, it allows me to kind of click different layers and build them around my form. And because I use gray, I don't really need to have these guides there. But those guides will help me later when I have to crop down to my final image. Okay, I'm going to bring this one in. I like this for the neck and the head. And I'm not going to shrink it at all yet. I bring it in as a smart object. I lasso around the parts I hope to maybe be able to use. I'll get more specific later. Duplicate it onto its own layer, which rasterizes it and allows me to manipulate it. This is the beak I liked. Quite exotic looking. Now, when I bring them in as smart objects, they're showing me the resolution of the source image. And that's why I'm not changing them. I'm definitely not growing that source image at all. I'm just leaving it in full resolution right now. Because when we're dealing with the textures of birds, I wanted to use this maybe for the eye. So that blue eye is really cool. Thought it might be nice to have an alternative. Maybe I can use some of these feathers. So we're going to be playing a lot with all these different textures. And so I'm not going to be too quick to shrink things until I need the space. And it's always better to overlap pieces. And with animals, I have lots of opportunity to overlap them. That's not always true when you're doing landscapes. Okay, and then another part of the head is going to be these flowers. They're huge. I really only want this one that's in focus in the middle. And I'm going to do this in stages. So I've basically brought in everything I need for the head going into the chest and the wings. And I'm going to work with that a little bit before I then get into the legs and the tail and some of the other areas of my design. Okay, so now I have too many to fit all nicely. So now I can start shrinking the copies that I've made, always keeping the smart images in their full resolution. And I just do that by hitting Command T, holding down Shift, and I know that I want this flower to kind of fit around the eye, like so. And I might even build it off to the side here before I bring it on top of my sketch. Always nicer to work in full resolution. Then I'll click this layer, and I'll know I want maybe just this eye. Duplicate that, turn off what's behind it, bring that in, put it on top. So just having some fun with collages. And scale that If you hold down Shift, it will lock its proportions. If you hold down Shift and Option, it will shrink towards the center, which can be pretty nice, so you can see all the different versions without having to move it at the end. And then, of course, to move around your image when you're zoomed in, very helpful to hold down Spacebar and just click and drag. And I've switched to my stylus now. This should be a little bit easier. Of course, you can always use opacity to help place things. Kind of line everything up with that eye. The only problem with opacity is it makes auto select no longer predictable. But the first thing I want to do is line up this eye with this one. And then I might even try erasing it out. And I'm going to use a soft-edged eraser, maybe not entirely soft, at a reduced opacity. And I'm erasing away from this layer here. Because the reason I like compositing from animal reference, and switch to 100% opacity, and a little bit bigger eraser, is that it doesn't take much work at all to really creatively make your own creature just by overlapping two existing textures. And this project is going to be a lot about texture. So now, without much work at all, I've managed to create a new face of a bird just by combining those two. And then I can play with the opacity of this and see how much I want to blend it in. I'm all about the boldest colors possible in my design, so I'll keep it at 100% opacity, and I'll just soften it with this low opacity eraser where I think it needs it. Now, I wouldn't be spending this time on the head if I didn't know that this is the head position that matches my sketch. Right? So that's going to go right there. But it's nice to build it in large resolution if you have that capability before you shrink it down. So we're trying to do an assembly line model. Fix up the parts at the best quality possible. And then put them all together somewhere down the line. According to the plan of your sketch. Okay, so for this flower, I need to cut out the edges, and I can use the magic wand for that. But I might have to zoom in, because we're not dealing with atmosphere with this project. We're trying to get everything really cleanly shown. So I'm going to hold down Shift, add to my selection with the magic wand, and delete as I go, hoping for as clean a cutout as possible. And be careful not to have too high a tolerance so that it actually bites into my flower. And while I'm selecting, I can hold down Spacebar, click and drag to move around, and to keep adding to my selection, just hold down Shift. It's very nice when the background of your reference is out of focus and the thing that you're cutting out is in focus, because that